the presentation. All right. So I am talking about, I'm Julio Barros, and I'm talking about running LLMs locally. One thing I want to say is that this is a big picture talk. We're going to talk about some different options and things. It's a fairly technical topic, and that's because everybody here or everybody that's asking about this has different requirements and they have different constraints. So their solutions and their approaches will be different. They'll vary, right? So this is all still very, very new, and it changes every day. Every day there's a new application or a new way to do something or a new way to approach this. So this isn't for everyone, but I hope you will get something out of it, and at the very least, kind of understand what the different options are for running an LLM locally. So what do we mean by locally? I particularly want to talk about maybe running on your laptop or running on your home or work network, on a computer on your home network, something you can access kind of directly and locally. So not over the internet or anything like that. I'm not talking about running things on your device. That's kind of the next step that's coming down the road. But it's a little bit even more technical and even more involved with how you might want to do that. And not in your application. So if you have a invoicing app or something and you want to run an LLM in that, you can embed an LLM in your application, but that's also more technical and not exactly what we're trying to do, talk about today. And I'm not saying about running it in your virtual private cloud or your virtual private network. If you want to do that, that's certainly possible, but your vendor probably has a good solution for you that you could look at first. Like you can look at Google Vertex or Amazon Bedrock or some other service, that your vendor probably has. And the last thing people want or think about is hybrid device and internet, where some things run locally and then some things reach out to the internet for maybe the more complicated or the more difficult things. I'm not going to talk about that either. So this is just mostly on your laptop or on a computer under your desk, let's say, or in the closet in an equipment room. Now, why would you want to do this? Lots of people ask me about this, and they have a bunch of different reasons why they want to do this. Number one would be privacy and security. For whatever reason, they don't want to send their questions or their documents or whatever out over the internet to some other vendor. So that's the number one. If they feel like if they could run it locally in their network, then they can control the information and they can control what the LLMs do and say and so on. Another one might be cost control. Now, this is a tricky one because to implement this, it's going to cost you money versus just paying an API fee. But if you have a really high rate of API usage, it's going to start to go up. Or if you have to buy the $20 a month plan for lots of different employees or lots of different students or something, and they don't use it that much, then your costs will be might be a concern. Another one is either they have temporary, let's say, budget or legal issues that they want to work out. They don't yet have legal permission, or they don't yet have the budget for some project, and they don't want to wait until that gets approved. So they want to maybe do a proof of concept with a local LLM, and then show its value, and then get the budget approved, or get legal, or get security to sign off on using an LLM for something. Another subtle use case or another subtle reason is configuration control. You may love ChatGPT or GPT-4 and it's fantastic, whatever, but they may change it for some reason and you have no control over that. So they may add an extra guardrail one day, they may update something that changes the way it responds, and then all of a sudden it might mess you up. So people sometimes really want to have control over something that once they approve something, once they put something in production, it'll never ever change. That may or may not affect you or be a concern for you, but some people do want to control that. Another reason is they want to automate some local workflow. Let's say on your computer or on your network, you already have a ton of documents, you already have a database there, and you want to automate that stuff without having to send it to the cloud for some reason and then back to your local machine to do something. And then the last reason that I always hear is experimentation. People either want to create proof of concepts, they want to experiment with different ideas, different models, different tools, different frameworks. They want to see if they can have a model do this or do that, or control this or control that, or they want a really easy way to run custom and fine-tuned models. So you don't. OpenAI will fine-tune GPT 3.5 for you. If you have a lot of money, they'll fine-tune GPT-4 for you, but you might want to run a fine-tuned llama or something like that for some reason. And then being able to do that locally is really useful. Some common use cases, right? So like, why would you want to do this? General question answering. That's the first thing we think of. You ask the LLM a question and it gives you an answer. Chat is, it remembers what you asked, and then you can ask more questions about what that is, about what you asked before. Chat is you have a bunch of documents and you want to be able to chat with those documents. Again, maybe without uploading them, or either for privacy reasons or just because they're already here and you don't want to have to deal with duplicating them somewhere else. Actually, I've had a lot of programmers come to me and say that their workplace won't let them use like Copilot because they don't want their code leaving their systems. That's kind of strange to me, but they could, if they wanted to, set up a local LLM that's very specific to code and point their editors at the coding LLM and get the same kind of coding assistance in their editors. You may also want to set up an API if you're a programmer to automate your workflows. Like I said, kind of some of the classic use cases are text classification. You get a message in and you want to know, is this a complaint or a compliment? Is this talking about this or is it talking about that? You know, who should look at this? Who should look at that? So text classification is super popular or super common use case. Similarly, summarization and transformation, maybe automatically summarizing news or articles or internal memos or anything like that, or transforming them so that they are at a different reading level or transform them for a different audience or whatever. Super common use case. And then again, automated responses. Kind of think of like custom support, or maybe not customer support, but maybe internal support or something where you send an email to somebody or some internal service, and it reads the email and kind of responds to you instead of like, you know, we'll get back to you about this. It'll give you a more automated and customized response. And then this is also kind of advanced, but agent explorations. Agents have picked up a lot of steam and hype and interest lately, and so people want to explore using agents to either automate their machines, automate their workflows, have them do different tasks, multi-step tasks for them, and trying to try out agents locally in kind of a local environment seems to be really popular. Especially since if you run an agent, it can go kind of wild and, you know, end up costing you a little bit in API charges. So those are kind of common use cases why somebody might be interested in this. Some considerations when you're going to do this. All things being equal, which they never are, bigger is better. A bigger model will be smarter, more powerful, give you better responses and so on, right? But smaller is faster and it uses less resources. So you may want to have a really big model, but you may want the speed of a smaller model, or you may not want to pay for the computing system required to run a smaller model. And then there's always the question of whether you should be running a general model or something that's been specifically fine-tuned for a particular use case. And that question's up in the air. It's really a difficult question to answer. The general models might be able to do more logic and reasoning, but the specialized model might be good enough to do what you want to do. And usually it's a specialized smaller model, so it should be faster and cheaper to run and do exactly what you need. So it's hard to say, but it's just something to consider. Again, with model sizes, resource requirements. The number one thing is, one thing is computation. So a 7 billion parameter model is really 7 billion floating point numbers that get multiplied and added up together over and over and over and over again, right? So CPUs are fast, but doing 7 billion multiplications and additions, you know, over and over again can really tax them. So if possible, you may want to run a GPU. GPUs are the processing units in GPUs are simpler, but there's a lot of them and they're very good at math. So that's what they were meant to do. So using a GPU might be what you want to do or need to do. The other big constraint is memory. 7 billion parameter model, you know, in its raw form, takes 7 times 4 gigabytes of memory. So it would take 28 gigabytes of memory, and that's a lot. That's a lot of memory for a 7 billion parameter. So if you wanted to run a 30 billion or 70 billion parameter model, that'd be 70 times 4. So you're not going to have that kind of memory on your laptop. The thing is, there are approaches to kind of squash that down. They call them quantized. So you can run a quantized model, and a 7 billion parameter model might take 8 gigs of memory, and that would fit on your laptop. The other thing to realize is that the GPU, oh, sorry, well, let's go back to this. The GPU memory is separate than the CPU memory in most systems. So you might have a laptop with 32 gigs of memory or 64 gigs of memory, but your GPU might only have 4 gigs or 8 gigs. That means that if you're going to run on GPU, you're only going to be able to run a much smaller model. But if you're going to run on CPU, you can fit a bigger model into main memory. Was there a question, Paul?
Yeah, there was a question. RJ had a question.
Yeah, I have a question. With the mixture of experts approach that some models use, I heard that sometimes that can help reduce the resource requirements because they'll they'll get the model to basically pick which mixture of expert part to work on the problem, and then that part tends to be smaller, so requires less resource requirements to get a fast answer. Just wondering.
Yeah, all I can say is that everything is changing all the time and people are working on ways to make these things faster. The mixture of experts models use less memory. That's all being relative though, relative to a much bigger model. So you might be able to get the kind of quality out of a 70 gigabyte model by only using 30 gigabytes of memory. So they still require quite a bit of memory. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. The next thing to think about is if you happen to be on an M series Mac, and this isn't a commercial for Mac or anything, but they use a unified memory. So your system memory, the GPU can access the system memory, which is really handy in this case. It has some other drawbacks and some cons, like everything. In particular, the Mac GPUs are not as fast as the NVIDIA GPUs, but an NVIDIA, the top of line commercial card for NVIDIA only has 24 gigabytes of memory. I mean, I'm not commercial, consumer card, the one that we would use. Unless you wanted to buy an H100 or something for tens of thousands of dollars, an RTX 4090 has 24 gigs of memory, so you're only going to be able to fit about a 30 gigabyte model on there. And that's all it can do. Whereas you can get a Mac machine that's got 64, 128, 192 gigs of memory and run much bigger models. They'll be slower, but you can run them. So that's just something to think about. If you have an M series Mac, you might be able to run bigger models than in other cases. So some tools. There are many, many, many tools. I really don't want to get into like what's the best tool, because the best tool is going to depend on what your use case, what your needs are, and what your constraints are, and your requirements are, and everything. But if you wanted to embed something in your application, you could use a programming library like Hugging Face transformers, like LangChain, Llama Index, Llama File. Those all run LLMs for you. There are applications that you might want to download or run that will run the LLMs for you. A lot of these are things like Anything LLM or the NVIDIA chat that they just announced with RTX, where you can use the NVIDIA to chat with your documents locally. There are lots of different apps out there. What I'm going to talk about more today is when you have one application that's going to serve the LLM, and then other applications can talk to that server to submit requests, chat requests or whatever, and get responses back. The big ones the common ones that people use that I've seen out there, something called, usually programmers, this is a technical topic, is something called Ooga Booga, LM Studio, and Ollama. In particular, I'm going to talk about Ollama, because Ollama is my go-to LLM server. If you go to Ollama, you can install it. It runs on Windows, Mac, and on Linux. I use it on Mac. People had said that it was difficult to install on Windows, but I think they just made a big improvement, so it should be easier now. It gives you a command line interface, which I'll show you in a minute. You don't want to use the command line interface, but it's there. And then it gives you the ability to interface with other tools that do give you things like a chat interface, and you can write RAG apps, and so chat with your document type apps and everything like that. The API is very flexible. It's like OpenAI. So anything that then uses OpenAI should be able to use this, or at least you have a chance of getting it to work, just pointing it at your local LM instead of the OpenAI API. And it supports many, many models, which is really cool. I'll show you they have a library of a lot of models they have, but you can also configure your own model, and you can run your own fine-tuned and custom models if you wanted to. So the command line interface, this is Llama. These are the models. This is the model page. They support Lava, Llama 2, Mistral, all kinds of things. So whatever you wanted to experiment with, it would be there. The command line interface, you could type in things like Llama list, and it'll tell you what models you have installed. I've got these models installed. I can say, oh, llama run, let's try Mistral latest. And it'll just do this little local chat thing for me. Oh, I should pick the small one. Okay, I could say, what's the question? The standard question is, why is the sky blue? And it gives you an answer of why the sky is blue right here. And this is all running locally. Nothing is going out to the internet or anything like that. The sky is blue because of that, right? And I'll end that. So you might say, Julio, that's cool, but I'm not a caveman. I don't want to use a cave person. I don't want to use the CLI. I want a chat interface. Well, then you would also run this other tool called Ollama Web UI. And that gives you a chat interface that's very similar to ChatGPT. It'll say, oh, can I make this a little wider? Yeah, how can I help you? We'll just go with this, I think. No, I need to make it wider. You select a model because I have got a bunch of models installed. Let me take like Tiny Llama, which is a tiny, tiny model. Maybe I want to experiment with this to see if this might be something I could use on the edge or wherever. And I can ask this, why is the sky blue? And it'll load it up and run it. The great thing about Ollama is that you can change models on every request, and whatever model you have installed, it'll just switch to that. It might take a second for it to switch to load up the new model, but it'll run it out for you. I can have a new chat, and I'll try this. It even has like Lava, which is a multimodal model. I can upload an image and ask it to describe this image. And this is one I just, a screenshot I just took from the beginning of this meeting. It'll take a minute to load up the lava model. Hopefully it'll work. Demo guides and all.
Julio, I'll describe this picture. This is the Gen AI pioneers.
All right.
Head of everyone out there.
Oh,
or Gen AI junkies, as the Rosemary called us last week.
okay, so Gen AI junkies, it's not working right now. I don't know. Oh, there it goes. I think it just took a little while. Image
The
appears to be a
best
screenshot of a
looking
video.
Gen AI junkies.
Yeah. So it didn't say it was Gemini junkies, but it says it's a screenshot of a video conference with a web interface and talks about it. There's a person in the middle labeled speaker, whatever. So it'll describe the image. Great. Okay. And so you can chat with this. You can create new chats. You can switch the model. You can do all kinds of things. So this is very, this would be a great way to do a very private chat if you want to do that. What I think is really cool is using the API to automate different things. And so the automations are going to be very specific to your particular needs and what you want to do. So I tried to come up with something that showed off a bunch of different features, but it doesn't actually make sense for real life, whatever, right? So what I'm going to do is take an image, let's say of this sideboard here, generate the description with a lava, use that description to generate sales copy. Let's say I'm going to either create a new catalog. I sell furniture, and either we can create a new catalog, or I sell catalogs and I just want to generate a bunch of different catalogs for different use cases. Use that sales copy. I'm going to make it shorter because it was the sales copy it generates is kind of long. I'm going to take that description. I'm going to generate a new image, and then that image and the shortened copy will be my new catalog item. I hope that makes sense, right? So I have a demo here. This kind of programming is actually, it's programming, but it's pretty straightforward. You can do this in any language now. I am just going to have a function here that's going to run a prompt. So whatever prompt I give it, it's going to run. And then I've got one that will take an image and describe the image. The prompt is just describe this image. And so I upload this image of this sofa, and it says this image shows a modern 3-seater sofa with accent pillows. And I say create product copy like I would use it, like you would see in a catalog, but use it in the style of Jay Peterman from Seinfeld. I don't know if you remember Jay Peterman in Seinfeld. It's very flowery kind of sales copy, right? And so this model goes and generates 3 paragraphs of introducing the epitome of modern sophistication and comfort and so on about this fancy sofa. And then I'm going to shorten that. And so that's kind of long, so I just want a short blurb. So I take that copy and I shorten it. It says discover our dark gray tufted 3-seater sofa. And that's a nice little blurb. I take the description. I want to shorten the description because it's also pretty long, and the image, text to image model takes a really short description. So then I create a synthetic image using that. But the image that I do is it takes a short description, but then also update the description so that it's in a more modern style and appeals to a younger audience. So the new description will be for a more modern piece of furniture, and then I will take that description and generate a new image. And so here I get a tufted couch, but it's a much more modern, sleek, chic, elegant couch, right? So you can do all that. You can do that manually by cutting and pasting prompts. So you can automate it all. You can automate it all locally, and you have a folder full of images, and you can write it on every image there. And so you end up, this is the sideboard we saw before. It generates a new sideboard with a new description. There's a bed I had, a new bed, a new description. A couch, it generates a different couch this time, and a description, and a chair, and a new chair. I actually like this chair a lot. I would buy this chair. And a coffee table and a new coffee table. And it just runs that automatically. So this is the type of thing you can automate and just have it run constantly on your systems. All right. Oops. So my conclusion is running a local LLM is possible. Think hard about why you'd want to do it and what you hope to achieve, because that's going to drive a lot of the choices you make and a lot of the trade-offs you have to make. If you want to do this, I would say start with Ollama and Ollama Web UI to do the chat thing. See if that fits the bill. There are lots of apps out there, but if not, then look at the other apps for specific purposes. And then I hope that my simple little example that I showed you, that you can combine models in lots of different ways. Image to text, text to something else, and that something else, that new text to another image or something, can be really useful in some cases. So, and these automations can be created in any language. It's just a simple web HTTP post once you have the server running. And then I'll take questions, and please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions. This URL will take you to this QR code will take you to this presentation. And I just want to say I'm having a AI in production conference here in Asheville, which is more for product teams, people who want to build things like the automations or want to add AI to their products in July in Asheville. If you're interested in that, I'd be happy to answer questions about that also, or you can contact me about that. Thank you.
Fantastic, Julio. Thank you. First questions for Bob. Go ahead, Bob. Bob, you're on mute.
Hey, Julio, great job. Very helpful. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the email I sent you, and more particularly, I have kind of two related questions. One is Microsoft's new Phi 2 model seems quite impressive across a number of categories. So I want to get your comment on that. And then related to it, Cobus Grayling has been able to run these LLMs in Google's Colab. So I noticed on your presentation that you're using Jupyter notebooks, and Jupyter takes a bit of work, not for a person like you, but for mere mortals to set up.
Right.
So the question is for the other folks in the audience that aren't familiar with it, Google makes a free service called Colab, which basically allows you to run these Jupyter notebooks. And Lucinda had mentioned it in some chats before, so you don't actually have to set up your environment. You can actually run the LLMs, and perhaps, Julio, if you want to comment on it, have you have any experience in it? What do you think about running Microsoft's Phi 2 there? How about similarly in Colab, building a RAG, but a hybrid search RAG? So you not only can talk to your documents, you can actually talk to the LLM directly.
Sure. So Phi 2 is available for Ollama. It's on their page. They have the interesting thing is that there are lots of different models, and then every model has lots of different versions. So if we went to Phi 2, I forget how it's
Phi-2.
Yeah, Phi-2.
Yeah.
See that there are tags for different sizes, and then different quantization approaches for all those sizes. So there's like lots of different versions of them. So you actually can run Phi 2. You can run a lot of different models and test them out for yourself on your particular use case, because every model is going to do differently, is going to perform differently based on what the task actually is. So you can actually run Phi 2 here. The Colab thing is great, but I don't know how relevant it is to this particular approach, because you can run a Jupyter notebook, but you can't run the server, the Olama server. So that's the challenge here. You may be, you can certainly run Phi2 in Colab, but that's more of a programming approach than this, which is a little bit more of a client server approach. So you could write, if you go to the if this was something you were interested, and I don't know that it's any easier though. It's more technical, it's more programmer approach, but you can certainly do it. You'd go to the Phi2 page on Hugging Face, and they give you code for how to run this model. That's not it. This stuff here is what you would put into Jupyter, into the Colab, and it would run in the Colab. But that's a different approach than this, than what I just talked about. Okay.
Thank you.
Julio.
Thank
John.
you.
Go ahead, John. John, you're still mute.
Sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Julio, Carrie asked a good question that I should know the answer to, but I don't. How do you know which data sets and which inputs are each of the models are trained on?
Yeah, so that is a challenge, and that is something to be aware of, or to think about carefully, because if you go to Olama, well, it'll say something like,
Hugging Face might have that information, no?
yeah, that's what I was going to say, right? So if you go to something like
the
Starling
model
LM,
pages.
it'll say what Starling is, and then what information it's trained on. And then if it doesn't say here, you've got to go to Hugging Face to see what information is available about the model there.
A model hub, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, but that's on the open source models, right? How about the private models? They don't disclose all of it, do they?
Well, a private model, like I could take one of these open source models and train it on your data, let's say, and then there'd be no way to know what data was used. We'd have to, we would have to keep track of that, but somebody else looking at that model wouldn't be able to tell.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm talking about like the big public model, the quasi big private models like Gemini Pro and stuff. Gemini.
I don't know how to tell what Gemini is trained on. Gemini wouldn't be available here, right?
No, I'm saying
Llama.
I'm saying in this environment, you can actually look at that. Now you still have to know what's in the data set, like it's just going to give you data. It'll just give you the name of the data set, won't it?
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, so Stable LM was a model, but from Stability, it came out. It tells you that it was trained on a mixture of languages, and it'll tell you what the data set was if you look carefully. But there's no way to tell from the model itself. They've got to disclose that. If it doesn't say here, you've got to go to Hugging Face and see what it says Stable LM was trained on. It'll say Red Pajama or Orca dataset or something else, or it'll just say a synthetic dataset generated from ChatGPT, which you don't know what that it was, but something that they created. Just by looking at the model, you cannot tell what it was trained on.
Right. This is Tim. It's actually, I think, going to be more complex than that over time, because they tell you that, but I think in the courts they're going to want proof, or at least some legal attestation that they can take action against you if you lied about. And right now there's none of that. So they can tell you they trained it on this training set or that training set, but it's really, I'm not aware of any way you could prove that based on the resulting model.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you're going to have to get into some sort of affidavit, that says, yes, I really did. And if somehow it turns out that there were other things introduced here, which can often be found out because you can get these things to regurgitate, as they say, a lot, then they can say, oh, you really trained it on this stuff that you didn't list. You're in trouble now. I think all that's still got to be settled.
This is great. Let's keep the questions coming. Julio, I want to jump back to the beginning and just crystallize what I hear a lot on is one of the reasons, the risk of using a ChatGPT, a public B2C model, is that one, I could potentially put in confidential information that would go into the log files over at OpenAI. And if I'm B2C, I'm giving them the rights already to potentially use that in training data. And if they're using training data, maybe someone could use a prompt injection or hack and actually see that confidential information. It's got to go through a bunch of hacks, but that's the 0.001% risk. Is that said correctly?
I think that is what people are concerned about.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the terms of service, the API, they're not supposed to keep the data except for up to 30 days. And then they don't train on the data through the API. So that may not be as big a concern. And then if you're really concerned about that, you could talk to the vendor directly and say, I want, top, security for this. I want assurance that you're not going to use or keep this data, and you can work that out with them. But that is definitely one of the concerns.
Right. And then the second one, it's still a trust issue. I'm still
Yes.
contractually trusting that. And if I
Absolutely.
really want to have 100% my employees all the time on the log files, then I need to do the approach you're going down. Here's one of the reasons I put down here. Correct?
Right, exactly. And so we get a lot of these requests from medical facilities, a lot of like military and defense kind of organizations, hedge funds don't want to trust anybody or give anybody any information. Yeah, and there was one more which is skipping my mind right now. That's really common with that.
CIA.
I think also, at least I've talked to one organization that uses the Azure interface, and Azure will log everything.
Yes.
So you can create all the logs and all the protections of that ilk that you want. You can see everything that was sent back and forth, who did it. You can filter both the input and the output. So that's what a lot of corporations are doing.
That's true for any service you use out there. They tend to log everything. And then the question is how long they keep those logs. Sometimes they get compressed and archived forever. I think the OpenAI terms of service says they'll keep them for 30 days. Sometimes there are legal requirements that they have to keep them, in case the police come knocking and they've got to turn those logs over, something like that. I don't know. But you can talk to them about that. If you want to run
Well, these are the company's logs that through Microsoft. These are not OpenAI's logs. So in other words, Microsoft lets you establish your own logging specific to the AI request, and they help you with it. Right. So this is beyond OpenAI stuff.
Right. No, I'm just saying that every SaaS service out there does that. So every time you go on Facebook, there's a log. Every time you go on Zoom, there's a log. All of these systems keep logs. So that is something you need to be aware of.
Go ahead, RJ.
Yes, this has been really great, Julio. I really appreciate this. So my question is for beginners who want to dip their toe in the water and get their feet wet on loading a large language model, but they want to make sure that the model will cover their use case and run reasonably fast on their machine, which may be a very, regular small laptop with, just a minimal GPU capability. Is there an easy way to sort of weed out which models will work for a particular laptop and with a certain memory size or GPU size, and also know what the use cases are that it's good for?
Yeah, I'm going to say we don't know that yet. Certainly people are trying to make that easier, but for, like you said, for beginners, so all this stuff is pretty technical right now. I don't know that there's a simple way to something I could point you at to say, oh yeah, this app is great for that. There are lots of apps out there trying to do something like that, but it's hard then to match what the app does with everybody's use case, because everybody's gonna have a slightly different use case. So right now I don't know of a good solution for that, like a good approach.
And the follow-up question is, once a person does load a model, is it a lot of work after that? Like, do you have to do updates or things like that? Or once you load it, is it pretty much runs and you don't have to mess around with it?
Well, let's say you want to do the chat thing, right? So you would need to somebody would need to install Ollama for you, and then install Ollama Web UI for you. And then once that is set, and then pick a model. Let's say we pick Phi 2. Once you download Phi 2 and run it, you don't have to touch anything again. If you wanted to try a different model, you could upload that. If you wanted to try 2.1, you could download that and try that. So there's not a whole lot to do after it's set up, but setting up those two pieces is semi-technical, fairly technical. So
Well, and on that part, you said it's technical, you'd have to have somebody do it for you, but I heard also that there's these apps that will handle loading it for you and everything and make it really easy.
I don't know that anything is really easy. So I mean, yeah.
There's a lot
sure
of vendor talk there, RJ.
yeah. But people are working on that. So I expect it to get easier and easier as it goes on, but I don't know that anything's really easy today.
Okay, thanks so much. I appreciate all these answers.
Thanks, RJ. Let's go to Bradley, then Alan. Go ahead, Bradley.
Hey, thank you. I had a question about the RAG communicating with your own documents. Is that going to be set up natively when you do get this loaded up onto your local machine? Or is there going to be some extra steps?
So Olama is just the chat, is the LLM server. So
Right.
you need something to do RAG, you need something that's going to ingest the documents, maybe vectorize them, find a way to search them, handle your queries, accept your query, find the pieces of the documents that are important, and then send that to the LLM, send it to Olama, and send it back. So the RAG thing is a completely separate thing.
Right. Okay.
But people are working on making the RAG thing easier to use, right? So NVIDIA just announced chat with RTX, they call it. RTX is their GPU cards. So that might work for you. I don't know what I don't know what your requirements are, like what you really need, but something like that might work for you. Other than that, I would say, what was the one? Anywhere LLM, or let me, oops. Anything LLM might be the next closest thing to an automated RAG system. So that will also, you'll have to pull down, install Olama, and then you install anything LLM, you point anything LLM at Olama, and anything LLM will do the RAG stuff for you. It also do chat, also do other things for you, but that might be a good way to go.
Copy. Thank you.
Go ahead, Alan.
So this actually touches on something that we talked about a minute or so ago. Just how easy in setting this stuff up is it? I mean, when I think of, I want to run an LLM locally, I'm thinking, well, these days I want to run a database server locally. And 20 years ago, running a database server meant a team of 5 people running a dedicated piece of hardware.
Sure.
Are we at the point yet? And nowadays it's I click on a button that automatically installs it and sets everything up. How close are we to that level when we talk about LLMs?
Okay, I don't think we're close yet, right? But it depends on why you want. Let me ask you why. Not that you have to answer, but first, I think I would ask is why you want to run something locally. Why do you want to run LLM? What do you want to do? If you just want to do the chat interface, we're really close to that. If you want to automate a workflow, then you're going to need to program it anyway, so you're going to need a programmer. And if you want to play with agents or something, that's like still off in the future for everybody. So that is something off in the future. When it comes to databases, though, yeah.
But I mean, drawing the parallel again to databases, why do I want a database? Do I want it to maintain my recipes? Am I trying to run my Fortune 500 company? Yes, there's got to be some level of that, but at the end of the day, for all of those use cases these days, I press a button and install MySQL, or I press a button and install Postgres, and it just shows up.
Sure.
I feel like, until we get to that kind of point, if I've got to think about, well, wait a minute, do I have a GPU in this machine? Which ones run well on these GPU? I feel like we're not, I don't want to, I guess I don't want to sell how easy this is if it's not that easy.
I didn't say it was easy.
And I'm not saying you are, but I know a lot of people are saying, oh, don't bother with the cloud ones, just, install it locally. Anybody can do this.
And I'm sure they're happy, they'll be happy to have you pay them to install it for you, but I don't know.
Okay.
I want to take a quick digression though for those on the line. There are an easy solution that's not running it. It's these no code hosted large language models from our sponsors tonight, Custom GPT and others, and that really is easy and less than $50 or $100 to get a RAG implementation, but it's not behind your firewall or in your virtual system. But Julio, can I ask you a few other questions that come up a lot on?
Yeah.
So one thing I hear a lot, well, two things. One, we've seen Sam Altman say he thinks every country and every political persuasion is going to have its own chat bot so it can control its guardrails and whatever political spectrum you have. On guardrails, when you're using an open source model, I actually don't know this, does it come with a set of guardrails that you can tweak? Or is it run without guardrails and just however it was trained?
Yeah, so guardrails usually mean, or sometimes is like something you run before or after the LLM to kind of verify or validate the LLM's input and output. So you might ask the LLM a question and then get the answer back, and then somehow analyze the answer to make sure it's within your policy, whatever that is. So that's usually what a guardrail is. But the LLMs themselves, so these don't have any guardrails at all. The LLMs themselves are trained with reinforcement from human feedback, and they're trained to be, let's say, polite or whatever. So that's kind of an internal, it's not really a guardrail, but it's an internal thing. But you can get models that are uncensored, that don't have that, and they'll talk about anything you want it to. Like Llama 2 was maybe trained to, I don't know, not to talk about nuclear weapons or something. I don't know, something, it was trained to not talk about topic X. You can get Llama 2 that has been untrained, and we'll talk about anything you want to talk about.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to. So from a company standpoint, maybe if I'm a rebel, I want to get a untrained one to figure out how many people I can kill for $1. But if I'm way over on the company side, I may want to have one where we're not talking about politics, we're not talking about immoral things, and maybe having even a tighter control. And that's one of the big benefits of the open source.
Yeah.
Regardless of where it's.
Yeah, it's not built into the model. So you'd have your model, and then whatever your application is, you'd wrap it with guardrails that you'd want.
Good clarification. Thank you. Let's go at one more question, and we'll do an open mic for 10 minutes. Well, Julio, fabulous presentation. Thank you.
Thank you
so much. This is really, really helpful. Appreciate it. So the last 9 minutes are open mics when people can ask questions or share something. I know someone was asking about videos. I don't know I forget actually who that was, Bradley, somebody, but who wants to share something they've learned? There was an unbelievable amount of AI news last week. Sora from OpenAI is breathtaking. 1 million tokens in a prompt's breathtaking. Adam, what's impressed somebody? Lucinda, Adam, what have you been impressed with in the last 4 or 5 days?
Sora is actually not open yet, so we cannot say we tested it, but I actually have been using Pixelabs, Runaway, and even Stable Diffusion Video, and Sora is something completely different. It's not even in the scale of a later video generation models. If you have the opportunity to try Pixelabs, it's great for testing, for investigation, but it doesn't look real at all, and it struggles a lot with generating the movement. Sora is not just about the movement, but about consistent in space, about generating virtual worlds, understanding how the worlds move and the 3D view. And I think that's one of the greatest things it appears to be, because it's not open yet, so we cannot test it, but the results in the internet are actually very amazing.
So David, do you actually think it's real? Is it a marketing ploy to because Google was coming out the big news and maybe we may not see it for a couple of years, or you think it's real in the oven?
Well, beside Google actually show a fake demo of Gemini, so it's not trust anymore. Like they did it, but OpenAI never did something like that. They released ChatGPT and GPT-4 without saying, "Hey, we can do this," and they were not actually able to do it. Everything they say they could do, they can do it. So there is no exactly a reason to believe that this is not real, but we have to be critic. Like, we know even when they say it's true, maybe it is not. Maybe it have an hour to generate 1 second video. We don't know yet. But we know that if this is true, it will change a lot of things in video generation. And actually, we ruined a lot of startups. I don't want to be working like in Pickle Labs or Runaway and say, hey, are we ruined out? OpenAI now have a model that is really amazing, and we cannot compete to that. That should be sad for them.
Yeah, great. Thank you, David. Go ahead, Lucinda.
Yeah, so I guess one of the things I thought was most interesting that I heard about this week is the Mamba architecture. And yeah, so it's not anything that's going to be hitting the, you know, the broad usage, because really with these LLMs, they're kind of like wild animals, and they need to be like housebroken and trained and stuff like that, with all the guardrails and, you know, taking out all the toxicity, et cetera, before they're really ready for public consumptions. But what Mamba does is that it's a different architecture that greatly reduces the amount of resource intensity needed for LLMs. So it's built in some different way that's actually, I think, different than the what's it called? The transformer architecture. So it is more efficient in terms of memory and compute. I think like the memory or the compute goes up as a square for transformers, because you're computing everything. It's kind of more picky about what things that it applies compute to. And so it can do faster inference, et cetera. It's not, it's still in development. It was, basically at the stage of being an academic paper. But I thought that was very interesting, because I do think that, if LLMs are going to, they have to come down the cost curve a lot to be, more broadly used. Because if you really have some big data set or a lot of inferences that you want to do, especially if you want to use a good, strong model, then it gets to be very expensive very quickly.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you, Lucinda. Julio, thank you for a fabulous presentation. Everyone, thanks for showing up. We're going to end early. My new habit, trying to get the meetings to end a few minutes early. So thank you, everyone, and we'll talk to you next week. Have a wonderful week.